Hi everyone, welcome back. In this video, we will discuss about process scheduling in Linux kernel. So let's get started. This is the content that I will be discussing in this video. We will discuss about basic terms in process scheduling. We will also look into process scheduler and the scheduling algorithms. We will do a small code walkthrough of Linux scheduling implementations. We will also see preemption and context switching in the Linux kernel. At the end, we will see real-time scheduling policies and system calls related to the scheduling. So before going deep into process scheduling, we have to understand some basic terms. So scheduling is the scheduler's decision that which process will run next and for how much time it will run on a particular processor. Preemption is the act of involuntarily suspending a running process. And time slice is the time that a process run on a processor before it gets preempted. Yielding is the act of a process by which it suspends itself from a processor. And multitasking is a way in which multiple processes runs simultaneously. And there are two kinds of multitasking, cooperative multitasking and preemptive multitasking. In the cooperative multitasking, each process runs on a processor until it finishes. But in the preemptive multitasking, a higher priority process can preempt a lower priority process from the processor. In Linux, there are two types of processes. First one is processor bound processes, and second one is IO bound processes. So processor bound processes spend most of the time doing some calculations on the processor. Examples are like infinite loop, SSH keygen. But on the other hand, IO bound processes spend most of the time for waiting some IO data or some event. These include keyboard, network, disk, mouse. So scheduling policy requires two things. First is fast process response time or low latency, and second is max system utilization or high throughput. So these are the two things that any system requires for better utilization of the resources and high performance. So in earlier days, Linux had constant time scheduler. We call it as constant time scheduler because it can calculate the time slice and per processor run queues in the constant time. Constant scheduler was very good for processor bound processes, but it lacks performance on the interactive processes. So later the Linux community came up with the completely fair scheduler that had the good interactive response as well as it supported the processor bound processes, but it favors the IO bound processes. We will discuss about it more in the coming slides. So every process running in the Linux system has a priority, and that priority decides how much time of a processor that process will get. So priority to the Linux processes are assigned with the help of a nice value and real-time priority. Nice value varies from -20 to +19, and real-time priority varies from 0 to 99. So if a process has more nice value, then it will get the less priority and hence the less time slice of a processor. Real-time priority is just opposite of nice value. If some process is having higher real-time priority, then it will get the higher priority over the other processes. So let's discuss how this time slice of a process is decided by the scheduler. So Linux CFS scheduler assigns the time slice to a process based on the load of the system, and then further it is weighted with the nice value of the process. So if process is having high nice value, then it will get less time slice. The scheduler policy must dictate our default time slice. So why is that? If we have larger time slices, then most of the process will run on the processor, and that system will lack the IO bound processes or interactive processes. On the other hand, if time slice is very small, then the system will spend most of the time doing context switching between the processes. So there won't be much useful work. So we should have default time slice. Linux preemption is based on the time a process has consumed of the processor. So as we have discussed, the Linux scheduler provides large processor share to IO bound processes than the processor bound processes. So let's discuss why is this. So let's take example of text editor and video encoder. Text editor is an IO bound process and video encoder is an processor bound process. Also, if these two processes are the only running processes, then scheduler will provide the 50% of the processor's share to text editor and 50% of the processor's share to the video encoder. But text editor most of the time will be waiting for uh, some event from the user and it won't consume the processor time. But the encoder will read the raw data from the disk and it will convert into the video and it will run most of the time on the processor. So when a user provides input, then scheduler will see that text editor has not run much on the processor and it will preempt the video encoder and immediately it will schedule this text editor. So it will have very good uh, interactive response to the text editor. This is why the Linux CFS provides a larger share of processor to the IO bound processes so that they can have the higher priority than the processor bound processes. As we already discussed in the last video that Linux is preemptive operating system similar to the Unix operating system. So let's discuss the Linux scheduling algorithm. So in Linux maintains different scheduler classes depending on the different kind of processes. And there are three kind of processes in the Linux. First one is normal processes, second one is real-time processes, and the third one is ideal processes. So, and these each scheduler class has a priority. So the same priority processes will go into the same scheduler class. And CFS is the registered scheduler for normal processes. So before going deep into the Linux scheduling algorithm, let's discuss the scheduling mechanism of Unix operating system. So in the Unix, it is based on the process priority and time slice. But there were different kind of problems. So first problem was to mapping of the nice values to the time slices. That gave the suboptimal switching behavior problem. So let's consider this three scenarios. These are the nice values of the two processes. So you can see that if we are having different nice values to two processes and we are running on the system, so this is the time in which the two context switches will happen periodically. So if we are running two normal processes with nice value of 0, then each process will get 100 milliseconds of the processor. Then after each 200 milliseconds, it will every process will be scheduled and two context switches will happen after each 200 millisecond. So if we are changing the nice value and scheduling different processes, then you can see that varying context switches are varied with the time. Here, two context switching are happening within the 10 milliseconds. Here it is happening within the 105 milliseconds, and here it is happening within the 200 milliseconds. So it is not an optimal behavior. And the second problem was that relative nice values. So when we increase the nice value of the process, then the time slice it gets uh, affected very much. So here I have given two examples. So if we are increasing nice value of process from 0 to 1, then its time is reduced from 100 to 95. But on the other hand, if we are increasing the nice value from 18 to 19, then is decreased from 10 to 5. That is almost half of the earlier time slice value. So it was also an problem in the Unix system. And the third problem was assigning the absolute time slice to each process, but that is not possible because kernel can measure the time with the help of system timer that is running in the system, and each system timer has different tick period. So to assign the absolute time slices, it should be some multiple of the system timer ticks, but system timer ticks is hardware dependent, so it was not an uniform property of the Unix to assign the absolute time slices. And the fourth problem was that the wake up was implemented with the help of priorities, and it was also optimizing the interactive processes. So it was a problem in the Unix system. As I have already discussed that kernel keeps track of the time using the system timer tricks. We will have a separate video on the timers of the kernels. So this is the fair scheduling algorithm of Linux, and that is for the normal processes. So this scheduler will pick the next task to schedule on the processor based on the least runtime on that processor. And further, it is weighted with the help of the nice value of the process. So there is a concept called target latency. That is the total time of the processor, so that scheduler can assign the absolute time slice to each process. So here you can see that Linux is not uh, dependent on the time tick to decide the absolute time slice of a process. And the minimum granularity is the minimum time that each process will run on the processor, even there are infinite number of the processes on the system. But in the ideal case, completely fair scheduling or perfectly fair scheduling, if we are having infinite number of the processes in the system, then they should get the zero time slice to run on the processor. That's why we say that CFS is not completely fair, and the minimum granularity is 1 millisecond. And we call CFS as the fair scheduling algorithm because it gives each process fair share of the processor's time. Now let's look into the Linux scheduling implementations. So Linux keeps the timing information of every process. It also decides which process will be run next in the system. Also, we will see how this scheduling starts, which is the start point of scheduling. Also, we will also it implements the sleeping and the wake up of the processes. So timing accounting is the method by which we can keep track of the timing information of each process. So timing information is updated for each process on the each tick of system clock. On each tick of system clock, the time slice is decremented by the tick period. And when the time slice of that particular process reached 0, then we can preempt that process from the processor. So all the timing information is kept inside a structure called scheduler entity, and this entity is part of the task struct. So in this way, it is related to the process. If you have not seen this variable, then you can again visit this task struct and see this variable will be there with the type of schedule entity. So this schedule entity has a variable called virtual runtime. So we call it a virtual runtime because it is normalized runtime of a process based on the total weight of the runnable processes. And the timing information in the scheduler entity structure is updated by the schedule current function. And this schedule current function is invoked periodically by the system timer. Also, when a process becomes runnable or it blocks, then this function call will happen. So let's discuss how CFS scheduler decides which process will run next. So CFS maintains a data structure called arbitrary or red black tree. Red black tree has a property that it is very efficient to access any value in the red black tree within the log n time. This red black tree contains the scheduler entities as the values of the node, and the key of the nodes are the virtual runtime of the entity. So to pick the next task to run, it calls pick next entity function, and this function will find the leftmost node in the red black tree because leftmost node contains the entity that has minimum virtual runtime. So in actual case, the pick next entity does not actually traverse the tree to find the leftmost node because it has a variable called rv leftmost, which is updated while enqueuing the task into the red black tree. So it directly accesses this rv leftmost value and it can return to the scheduler. So this is the function enqueue entity that adds a runnable process into the red black tree. If process completes its execution or it goes into the blocked state, then the dequeue entity function call will happen, and this function call will remove the entity from the red black tree and it will call rv erase. So it will update the leftmost variable and it will find the next entity to be scheduled. So let's see where this whole scheduler and the scheduling starts. So within the kernel, anywhere, if we want to start the scheduler and the scheduling of the process, then we have to call this function called schedule. This function is defined in this path. So this schedule function is generic for every type of scheduler classes. To schedule a new task, it will call this function pick next task fair, which goes through each scheduler class starting from the highest priority, and it will select the highest priority process from the highest priority class. And this is the function sequence. Scheduler schedule function internally will call the main schedule function, and then this function will call the pick next task function, and then this function internally calls pick next task fair, and this function will call to the pick next entity that we have already discussed. So if you remember in the last video, we discussed that in the exit system call, when do exit function call happens, at the end it calls schedule function. So this is the sequence of the functions to update the timing information of the processes, and this is the function sequence of the scheduling of the different processes and the context switch. Now let's see the Linux implementation of scheduler structures and different functions. This is the schedule entity structure. Here you can see it is the node of the red black tree, and this variable on RQ is set when task is enqueued into the red black tree, and this is the execution start time of the process into the processor. This is the total time of the execution of process, and this is the weighted virtual runtime of the process. This is the statistics structure which contains different information regarding scheduling. This is the pointer to the parent node or parent structure. This is the pointer to the scheduler run queue, and this is the associated weight. If you go down, you will see here is the different structure, schedule RT entity structure. This structure is for real-time processes, and it contains different variable based on the requirement of the real-time processes. So now let's see how the update current function works. So this is the update current function. So this function is responsible to update different timing information of the process. And this function will update all the timing information in the schedule entity structure. So here you can see it is taking the current time, and it is calculating the delta execution time, and it is updating the exact start variable, and here it is incrementing the total execution time with the delta time. And here you can see this is the function where it is trying to normalize the actual runtime of the process, that we call it the virtual runtime. When the virtual runtime is updated, then there can be this virtual time can be the minimum virtual time. So we are updating the CFS run queue so that it is updated with the minimum virtual runtime process, and it is doing some other task. Now let's see the function pick next entity. So this is the pick next entity function. This function is being called by the scheduler to pick the next process to schedule. So here we have to focus on the main thing. So this function pick first entity is actually returning the leftmost node in the red black tree. And, this function is trying to find the next task to schedule by traversing the red black tree and finding the leftmost node in the red black tree, because the leftmost node has the minimum virtual runtime. So if you want to see how this function pick next entity is working, then we can visit it again. So if you go, so this is the pick next entity function. So here you can see first it is trying to find the next entity in the red black tree. If it is not finding the next value, then it is actually traversing the red black tree to get the leftmost node in the red black tree. Now let's see how a new task is enqueued into the red black tree with the help of enqueue entity function. So this is the enqueue entity function. So here it is first updating the timing information of the task, and then it is calling this function enqueue entity underscore underscore enqueue entity function. So this function is responsible for enqueuing the current entity into the red black tree structure. So if we go inside this function, so this is the main enqueue entity function. Here you can see that it is storing the current node into the link variable, and then it is trying to find a entry into the red black tree. If our node is if the our entity is before the entity it find, then we have to go into the left side of the red black tree, else we have to go into the right side of the red black tree. It is similar to the binary search tree search. So in this while loop, it is trying to find the actual location where this node, their entity should be inserted. After this location is finalized, it is trying to assign as a child to a parent, and then while the when this insertion will happen, the red black tree balance property may disturb. So with this function rv insert underscore color underscore cast, it is actually balancing the height of the red black tree. Now let's visit how the schedule function call is being called and how does it work. So this is the description of the main schedule function call. So here you can see it is saying that the main means of driving the scheduler and thus entering this function are. So this function is called when a process is uh, having some locks like mutex semaphores, or it is being into the blocked state and waiting in the wait queue. Also, when uh, when kernel is returning from the interrupt context, or kernel kernel is returning from servicing the system call, then it checks the TIF need reschedule. If it is set, then it will call the schedule function. And in the third point, it is saying that when we are waking up a sleeping process, then we don't call the schedule function. And here you can see that it is saying if kernel is preemptible, then we call this function when we are in the system call or exception context, and we are enabling the preemption of the processes. Also, when we are returning from the interrupt handler, then we can call this function. If kernel is not preemptible, that means preemption cannot happen. At that time, there can be conditional rescheduling of the process. So at that time, we can call schedule function, or explicitly we can call the schedule function. And similarly, as we have discussed, when kernel is returning from the system call or interrupt context, then it can call schedule function. So this is the main schedule function. It is defined like this. So here we have to focus in the main thing. So it actually calls to find the next task. So this is the function call called pick next task. This function is responsible to find the next process and the information and the timing information can be find with the help of find next entity function. So if we visit this function, so this is the pick next task function. Here you can see that it is calling to pick uh, pick next task fair function. This pick next task fair function in turn calls to the pick next entity function that we have already discussed. So in this way, the whole execution happens in the Linux kernel for scheduling of the processes. So when a process is waiting for some IO or some event, then that process goes to sleeping state. So we call it as the task sleeping. So when a process goes to the task sleeping state, then it removes itself from the uh, scheduler run queue and it put itself into the wait queue. Also, then it calls to the schedule so that other processes can be scheduled on the processor. It also sets its state to task interruptible or task uninterruptible. We can declare wait queues statically with the help of this function or dynamically with the help of this function. I have written this line in the red color because it is very important. When we are implementing sleeping and waking up of the process, that should be done very carefully because it can lead to deadlock of the system. So these are the steps a process takes when it puts into the wait queue. So first it creates an wait queue entry, and that created entry is put into with the help of this function add wait queue. After this function, it will call prepare to wait. So here it is setting its state to task interruptible or task uninterruptible. When the event is occurred, that code will call the wake up function call to wake up the waiting process. Then that process will uh, set itself to task running state, and then it will remove from the wait queue with the help of this finish wait function. So let's discuss the wake up sequence of a process. When wake up function is called, then it calls to the try to wake up. In this function, it will set the process state to task running state. Then it will enqueue the task to the red black tree or the run queue of the scheduler. So when a process is waked up, then it will check if this variable is set. If this variable is set, then it will call the schedule function so that other higher priority process can be run. So question comes, who calls the wake up? The wake up function call is called by the code that is responsible to make the event true for that a process was waiting. And I have written this paragraph into the red line because it is very important. So when a process is sleeping or it is in the wait queue, then there can be signal to wake up the process to do some task. So that wake up we call it as the spurious wake ups because it is the process is not waked up for the event that for that it was waiting. So the waiting of the processes should be implemented in the for loop so that it should constantly checking in the wait loop that if the event has occurred or not. It has to wake up only when the event has occurred for which it was waiting. So this is the whole wake up and sleeping of the processes. So here you can see that when process is running, then it is when it is goes to the sleeping, then it calls this function add wait queue, and it is added to the wait queue, and its state is set to task interruptible, and it calls the schedule function as we have discussed. So when task is not running and it's in the task interruptible state, then there can be signal that can wake up that process, or there can be the actual event for which the task was waiting. So in the both cases, it goes to the task running state. But here you can see that when signal wakes up the process, then it handles the signal, and again it goes to the task waiting state, so that it waits again for the actual event to occur, then only it will go to the task running state. So let's discuss the preemption and the context switching in the Linux kernel. So when we want to uh, switch to the different runnable process, then we have to switch its memory mapping with the help of this switch function. Also, we have to save the processor state of the previous process and load the processor state of the new running process. We can do that with the help of this switch to function. And when scheduler want to reschedule, then it will check this need reschedule variable that is set by scheduler tick function, and this function is called by the user space when it want to schedule a different process, or by the try to wake up function, and this function is called by the higher priority process if it want to schedule on the processor. So this need rescheduled variable is stored in the thread info structure, and it is not the global variable, because it is very easy to access this value from the task, and it will be readily available in the cache. Now let's see the user space preemption and the kernel space preemption. So when kernel is returning after servicing the system call to the user space, then it can call to schedule function to preempt the currently running process and schedule the different process. Similarly, when kernel is returning to user space after handling the interrupt handler, then also it can preempt the currently running process and schedule the different process. In the kernel space, it has to check the need reschedule variable as well as the preempt count. When need reschedule variable is set and preempt count is 0, then it can preempt a currently running task when it is safe to preempt. When an interrupt handler exits before returning to the kernel space, it can preempt the currently running process. Similarly, when kernel code becomes preemptible again, that means when preempt count becomes to 0, because preempt count is set when we take a lock, then preempt count will increase, and when we unlock, uh, then the preempt count will decrease. So when the preempt count will reach to 0, then we can say that kernel code is preemptible, and at that time we can preempt that task and we can reschedule the different task. If a task in the kernel explicitly calls schedule, then also we can preempt. And again, when a task becomes the not runnable, then we can call to the schedule function and preempt the currently running task. So let's discuss real-time scheduling policies. These policies are for real-time processes. We have a special real-time scheduler for real-time processes. Real-time processes are of two types, schedule FIFO and schedule RR. So in schedule FIFO, every process can run for infinite time. in the first in first out manner, but in the schedule RR, they have a specific time slice. When a process completes its time slice, then other processes of the same priority runs in the round robin fashion, and the higher priority process can preempt the lower priority process. Here it is written, both real-time scheduling policies implements static priorities. So why is that? It is because uh, these priorities are set statically, so they get the more priority over the normal processes always. And real-time processes has two kind of behaviors. So first one is soft real-time behavior and second one is hard real-time behavior. So in soft real-time behavior, kernel does not guarantee that it will complete the task in the timing deadlines, but in the hard real-time behaviors, kernel ensures that the task will be scheduling will be completed within the time limits, but kernel makes no guarantee on the capability to schedule real-time tasks. But it has been observed that kernel Linux kernel performs quite well on the real-time tasks. So these are the system calls related to the scheduler. So the nice system call is for to set the nice value of a particular process. So these are the variables into the task structure. So we set these values according to the our requirement. This system called scheduled set scheduler tells the policy by which it want to schedule the process and real-time priority. This system called schedule set params sets the real-time priority of real-time processes. And this similarly, this system call gets the maximum real-time priority of the process. And it gets the minimum real-time priority of the process, that is 1. Similarly, this system called schedule set affinity, it actually the setting the process on which processor it should run. So by default, all the bits are set in this variable CPU allowed, so that a process can run on any available CPUs. But if you want to bind a process to a specific CPU, then we can change this variable, and according to that, the process will be scheduled on the particular CPU. And this system called scheduled yield actually temporarily eats the processor, means it tells the processor that no longer I want to execute on it, and other processes can be scheduled on this processor. So in conclusion, we can say that we have discussed about the scheduler and scheduling, and we have discussed few scheduling algorithms in the Linux kernel. We have also done the code walkthrough of the different implementations of the Linux scheduling mechanisms. Also, at the end, we have discussed the real-time scheduling policies and system calls. So this is all for this video. I will see you in the next video.